Specifically, I emphasize specifically, without pointing fingers at another one or another party, what will you do differently to bring more jobs to this district? Please specify the industry and how.
Well, it's the reality of this job is, as a member of Congress, you have to move. It's difficult to work without the House and the Senate and the President, who understands what drives the economy and drives jobs. The House passed 30+ jobs bills this past session, and they've gone over to the Senate and they've languished. We voted to repeal the Affordable Care Act. We voted to put a budget in place. The Senate has failed to pass a budget. So it's hard not to point fingers when all of our efforts have stalled. What we did accomplish, and what I did vote for, was 3 free trade agreements, which will benefit our district directly. It's why I voted for them. Dan has come out against this. He thinks somehow it ships jobs to China. These free trade agreements with South Korea, with Colombia, and with Panama are going to be very good for our district, very good for our farmers, very good for our manufacturers. We've worked closely with Center City CEO, and the plan is to, we've been chosen as one of the sites. It's a 12-county region here in upstate New York, to double the number of exports over the next 5 years leaving our district. That's good. That creates jobs when we're increasing the amount of product that we're shipping out. Cuba County grows soybeans. They're shipped on rail to the port of Oswego and shipped over to China. That's a good thing for our local farmers. We voted to repeal the Affordable Care Act. That, I believe, will really help the upstate economy. We voted to extend the current tax rates so that all of our job creators will have certainty. I voted for a bipartisan transportation bill because it will be good for our district. It will create jobs. It will, all of our construction companies will be able to build roads and bridges. One of the legitimate functions of the federal government that they should be involved and engaged in. Transportation bill was something we were able to accomplish. But at the end of the day, if we're going to get jobs in the economy going, in upstate New York and throughout the country, because this is really a national issue and it's a local issue, and it is the thing that's on most people's minds, is we have to have a fundamental understanding of the government's role. We just saw this just today, some jobs numbers came out about the number of government jobs that were created. There's a legitimate role for government. There are legitimate government jobs, but it is the private sector who's going to get the American people back to work. They're the real job creators, and they are the ones that create wealth for the middle class. And so we need to empower our job creators. We have to understand, and this is what Dan and Ursula don't understand, when you seize capital from the private sector, when you raise their taxes, when you increase their regulatory costs, when you give it to the government, it limits how our economy can grow. And that's why raising taxes in this fragile economy is the wrong way to go. It's why increasing regulations at any cost and fees on our businesses. Let them keep their money so that they can grow their business, they can hire, they can buy more equipment, they can expand that business.
You know, fair. I thought we were supposed to answer that question without referring to one another.
Well, you are allowed to follow those rules.
Okay, I'll be following those rules. I mentioned earlier that I support a public jobs program, and one of the reasons that I find most compelling is that when working people and public employees, for example, have money in their pockets, they can go out and spend it in their local economy. We can support our farms, we can support our tourism industry, our wine industry, for example. So there is indirect job creation through public employment. I think that's really important to identify. And given all the years that we've seen of subsidies to the fossil fuel industry and the nuclear power industry, I am in favor of subsidies to renewable energy. I have a good friend whose father, for example, sells solar panels, and I mean, that's a job, selling solar panels and installing solar panels. And so I support the creation of those kinds of jobs that will make us much more sustainable as a community in the long run. But ultimately, you know, it's not the government's job to do everything, but it is the responsibility of the federal government to promote the general welfare. It says so right at the beginning of the Constitution. And if people are out of work, if people don't have money in our pockets, if the cost of health care is sky high, if we're unemployed and we can barely afford food, we need to make the government, and the role of Congress is to make sure that our basic needs can be met. So I think that's really important. And we're in a time of crisis right now. So Mike, you asked the kind of specific jobs that we have created. And so in the public jobs program, communities identify their needs. So I don't think it's the job of myself or anyone in Congress or the president to say what jobs Central New York needs. So the role of implementing and identifying the public jobs would be up to the local community. Where, I live in the city of Syracuse, where we have really high, we have low graduation rates, for example, and a critical need that I see there are youth programs. I work with a summer youth bike program, and we operate our bike program in the evenings because we know that this is the time where kids need something to do. So I think there's an array of community needs that need to be met, and I think it's time we put people back to work meeting them.